Just wrapped up a nice long day here at our main 6-acre site, harvesting pawpaws and digging up nursery stock with Juan, and thought I would take a little wander before I head home, take a look at just some meandering things in this landscape towards the end of the growing season. The first thing I'm standing in front of, I'll talk about. These are the 6 raised beds that we built 2 years ago, 2 years ago I think. I'll link to it here where we talked about this very, very inexpensive system, basically permaculture beds in position with wooden frames made out of, in this case, black locust and driven staves. They've worked really well. This year, to be honest, with our little new lady Zelda in our life, I haven't been up here gardening as much as I'd like. This landscape's become more, zone 3, zone 4, and the permaculture zones of use, less interacted with. And so my mom didn't really garden in here all that much either. But that being said, there are some tomatoes and some beans. You can see on the north end here, these beans actually climbed nicely up a lattice work of pruned hazel branches and made their way up into this chestnut tree. And there's actually a fair bit of beans still in there, so that's kind of a fun little experiment. Spent a fair bit of time doing the last main mowing with the electric riding mower. We still have mowed areas for gatherings and things like that, and most of our main pathways that are drivable. And so harvesting that material off with a bagger system on the back of a riding mower lets me put these beds to sleep, so to speak. So you can see there's crazy deposition of material in here. There's leaves, there's grass clippings, there's pine needles, everything in between. So we're just basically bedding it down for the winter in the beds that we're doing a reset on. Some of the perennial beds we'll just let keep growing. So like here's one that's got good King Henry and sorrel. There's parsley on the north end. The deer have been having a lot of fun in that one. But we'll put some grass clippings down there if and when we mow again. We wrapped up our pawpaw harvest today. Whatever remains is going to be for the wildlife. There's definitely hundreds and hundreds of fruits. Shared those with friends. Had a thing locally here with some folks. Our friend Kate and some other people took us up on the idea of collecting pawpaws, processing the fruit for winter use, and just getting the seeds back to us without letting them dry out. So we're going to end up with probably a good many thousand seeds of pawpaw. Some will be planting in air prune boxes, and if things align this winter, we'll probably offer 100 packs of fresh, never dried out, really healthy pawpaw seed, along with a bunch of other types of tree seed. Just dip a toe into the idea of offering seeds. I know folks have been interested in that. It's nice to have our own seed from our own plantings. I thought I would take a quick look at our pond project. We dug with a skid steer and then refined with an excavator 2 or 3 years ago. Very, very dry time of year right now, and this pond itself is kind of leaky. That said, there's a lot of surface area. It's extremely shallow. Certainly I'm not going swimming in a thing like this, but we've seen blue herons, we've seen ducks, we've seen lots and lots of frogs and tadpoles going on in there. Certainly this is a watering hole for deer and rabbits and all sorts of wildlife. So broad and shallow and in the shade. Be nice if it was completely full. That's the fill line, so it's got huge amount of water that it could take in. But it's been here during the driest part of the summer and offering a nice little ecosystem. I'm noticing cattails are starting to form on that end, so that'll make the water even clearer over time. I think I'm letting go of the idea of this being a pond that we can swim in, and more have it for the ecosystem service of making sure animals always have reliable water, and there's a place for flying water type birds to have a place to land. Most of the crops in this landscape have wound down for the season. Like I just mentioned, we're finishing up pawpaws today. There's some persimmons, some wild American persimmons that still have fruit, although it feels like chipmunks and squirrels and birds have really discovered persimmons in this particular landscape. We had a couple trees that had hundreds of fruit that now have, I think I counted 2 on one of the trees. So one of the fun things about having these living systems where you're not trying to get everything for yourself, you want to share. Sorry about my shadow back there, but that's me. But you're going to lose a lot to wildlife, and we're just having to learn how to work with that. There's another place nearby that has lots of persimmons and not as much habitat for those wild creatures, so we'll be picking our fruit from there and getting our seed from there too. One of my favorite apples in this landscape is a very, very, very late golden apple. Very tart, kind of sour apple. I think it's a wild one. Maybe it's a grafted, I don't know. But I've been slowly renovating the canopy of this over the years. Biennial sort of apple in general, but so many fruits that are up there and lots on the ground. Right now we're not in a good position to process much more, So we're just going to let those be for the deer for now. And then I'll come back around maybe once we're up and running with shipping and we've got a rhythm happening with our later fall work, and try to do a good shaking and harvest a bunch and make some very tart, very strong cider from this. A lovely surprise this year. This tree in front of me is a Dunbar's plum, as named by Kenny Asmus of Oikos Tree Crops, that I bought in a bunch of years ago. I had to look back through my records to try to figure out who this was. Loaded with lovely golf ball sized plums with exquisitely sweet flavor. I guess this is a hybrid between beach plum and a wild American plum, and it's self-fruitful. A few hundred fruit hit the ground. We ate every last one of them and saved every seed. So we'll be filling at least 2 air prune boxes with Dunbar's plum to grow out and hopefully offer next fall. The nursery beds are still very, very active. Here's one of Turkish Rocket, and there's Osage Orange seedlings growing in there. The deer are starting to get more intense, so we're hoping for a good frost in this landscape so we can start digging in a more thorough way. You can see good King Henry getting lost to the weeds a little bit, but still doing well enough, and this will be just fine. The nice thing with the herbaceous perennials, when they get browsed by deer this time of year, we're going to cut them flush to ground when we go to dig them up and ship them anyway, so the deer can get a snack and people still get their plants. Right now I'm walking through this thicket of sea berries. These are really established. There's a dude behind me there, there's Radiant there, Cerola, Orange Energy. In fact, this whole little scene in here behind me and around me is moving into seaberry dominant. So it's been nice to see, even with tons of deer exposure and pressure, with tons of wildlife, the birds don't really eat the seaberry fruit until they're really ripe, and we're done with them by then anyway. And it's cool to see how much this thicket forms. It's almost problematic. It spreads in a way where it's like, yo, you need to slow down a little. But we love and appreciate that, and it holds the option of us being able to dig these really nice big suckers for local folks that want bare root plants. We tend to dig them and offer them in the spring. So we got nursery stock shooting up all over the place, some of them as tall as I am, that are viable and ready to go, known clones. But it's also a little bit of a burden. The burden of abundance in plant material. Speaking of abundance and sometimes challenges associated with it, we have autumn olive in the landscape that are wrapping up their crops. They're a very nice late fall crop. For those of you that think this is the worst plant in the universe, that's fine, that's up to you. One thing you could do is consider what's called a destructive harvest, where you go in with pruners and take branches that are laden with fruit and cut them, thereby reducing the potential seed load of them spreading into the ecosystem. We've been trying to do that in order to keep these plants pretty well managed. Is just like we do with the seaberry, we cut laden branches, especially ones that are blocking walkways or that have gotten tall enough that we can't really get to them anymore, and we cut them so that we can process all of that fruit and seed into fruit leathers and wines and incredible medicine. And this way we can appreciate this plant. They can be in the landscape facilitating nitrogen fixation and successional arc movement and not be really escaping into the wild. But my gosh, what a lovely character to have around, I think. In fact, there's some autumn olives that are improved cultivars. Like this is Charlie's Golden, which is a phenomenally sweet, flavorful, really abundantly loaded golden late season autumn olive. It's not a very large fruit, but very nice flavor. And here, this autumn olive is offering the successional support to this apple. This will be the keystone plant who's here in the long run. And for now, the autumn olive is adding nitrogen to support the apple. And once the apple's tall enough, we can cut the autumn olive out and let this be an apple context. Here's a cultivar called Amber, which has very, very large, straight up pearls of fruit, translucent. This is Zelda's favorite fruit so far in her life. She's just under 1 year old, and so far this is the one she wants to go to and eat from. Big, sweet, juicy, very lovely. And you can see today, Juan and I went through and cut this, the top off of this. That's what I'll bring home to them for fresh eating, which will reduce the seed load in the environment. It will liberate a nitrogen pulse to support the willow. There's other little trees, some apple trees that are planted underneath them. And we'll go through and try to do a very thorough hand harvest of the rest to keep the seed load down. You can see just how immensely loaded these plants are with food and medicine. And their role in the ecosystem, it's a challenging plant in lots of contexts, but in a context like this where we're trying to repair, this was very, very abused agricultural land in the past. So there's a lot of fertility rebuild that needs to happen. And these plants are very good at it so long as we reduce them when the time is right. So that's here supporting an apple tree, that's over here. There's some over here supporting oaks and hazelnuts. And once those are strong, the autumn olive is cut flush to ground. All that nitrogen is released to the next level of succession. And we can leverage the potential of these pioneering species, the sea buckthorn, the autumn olive, the gumi, all very competent early successional plants that with good, thoughtful, aggressive management can be contained in a landscape in a wonderful way. I know this always brings up frustrations with folks, the autumn olive discussion. When I say affirming things about that plant, some people tend to get very upset, and I'm sorry that that's the case. What biggest concern that people have offered up is, what if it escapes outside of your management? I understand that question and that concern. If they were to escape to the west, they would escape into a monocultural apple orchard that is sprayed with imidan and captan, which are both fungicides and herbicides, that's brush hogged and has been tilled in between those rows for decades and decades. They would not be disturbing a native ecosystem. If they were to move to the north, they would land in our neighbor's landscape, which is a tightly mowed, twice weekly mowed lawn. And if they stop mowing, they would be growing in a landscape that has had very, very tight successional suppression for a bunch of years. You get the idea. There's a lot of farming, there's a lot of land management around here that could use the support of nitrogen fixing plants like autumn olive. But let's have some discussion that's helpful and productive. If you feel like it's a bad plant, that's fine. Offer up in the comments a northeast native alternative to autumn olive that you would encourage that I explore or that other folks explore. Ideally, it's a deer resistant, rabbit browse resistant, drought tolerant, flood tolerant, super cold tolerant, nitrogen fixing shrub form plant that makes absolutely delicious fruit and medicine. Those are the niches, those are the aspects of autumn olive that I appreciate and why they're in our design. Are there other analogs we should be looking at? Please let us know. Let's have some constructive discussion about that down below. Anyway, that's the meander for now. Please let me know if there's other parts of the system. Maybe I can make some videos of Juan and I and other folks helping with digging nursery stock. We're actively beginning that process. Today we dug up a bunch of yastaberry and black currants and some elderberry. We'll be continuing to work on that, and then we'll get into shipping in the next week or two. We'll let folks know when we're getting into shipping in a really thorough way. We've got a few hundred orders to satisfy this fall. I'm going to try to move on that in an expeditious manner. And please feel free to let me know in the comments what sort of content, what sort of topics and parts of our system would you like us to be exploring a little bit more actively. Maybe we'll make some time to make some more videos. Thanks for watching.